oggi del convegno dedicato a Tosti e la romanza tra 8 e 900. Abbiamo qui con noi l'ultimo relatore della giornata. Detlef Rindom ha studiato letteratura inglese a Oxford e pianoforte al Royal College of Music. Ha però, oltre allo studio della letteratura, un dottorato in musica, l'opera e la cultura dell'opera nel XIX e XX secolo, la musica da film, la storia del canto e della performance. Sta ultimando la sua monografia 1914 e sì, Milano, New York City e Buenos Aires sono le città prese maggiormente in considerazione and mass publics in London's fine secolo. Accogliamo con un applauso Detlef Rindom.
Grazie mille, grazie a tutti, che non è normale per me. Okay. In a key section of her 1887 biography, Verdi, Otello and Milan, the American writer, opera and operetta singer, and impresario Blanche Roosevelt described her chance encounter with Francesco Paolo Tosti at the reception for Verdi's Otello given by Milan's mayor in 1887. Tosti, like Roosevelt, attended the event alongside a range of Italian musical celebrities, and his presence at this legendary premiere was a clear sign of his professional success and strong relationship with the Ricordi firm. After first summarizing Tosti's life story, a difficult youth leading up to his current privileged position in London, Roosevelt was clear that Tosti was the supreme figure in his genre by the late 1880s. The man with the glass was none other than Francesco Paolo Tosti, perhaps the most celebrated songwriter of the day, known throughout the world wherever there is a piano or a vocal Italian album, a pianino or Barbary organ. Today, his songs are sold by millions. He is the most successful living composer of chamber music, and he is not only idolized by the worshippers of popular melodies, but his talent is very original. He is an ingenious musician and excels in those touching, pathetic love ballads, which alike touch prince and peasant. His compositions have not the elaborate pretensions which distinguish some of the songwriters of the present day. Their simplicity does not always strike the chord which simplicity should awaken, but more pretentious works shall be forgotten, and Tosti's will occupy a favored and lasting place. Roosevelt makes several interesting claims here. Tosti's music manages to appeal to an enormous part of the musically unambitious public, identified here with the popular. Yet it remains distinguished by its unique character in ways that prevent it simply becoming part of a mass culture. His music crosses social classes and geographical divides, from prince to peasant, in her words, and from Italy to London and beyond. And it is music, so I'm not quite sure, is this communicating as it should do?
Yes, but not too close.
Okay, sorry.
Close,
this is my...
but not too close.
Oh, is this okay? You can all hear me perfectly? Okay, then I'll stay still. Va bene? Okay. And it is music that, moreover, circulates across a broad range of instruments with different class associations, from refined domestic settings to the noisy and clearly mobile urban figure of the Barbary organ. Roosevelt's conclusion seems to hint at the risk of more skeptical reactions to Tosti's songs, yet she remains confident of his enduring place in the musical repertory of this intimate chamber music that nonetheless circulates and sells all throughout the Western world. The contours of Roosevelt's assessment gain further clarity if we place it alongside a more cautious account of Tosti's standing that emerged only a few years later in the English Grove Dictionary of Music. Grove, writing in London, was more muted about Tosti's status, and he stressed that Tosti's popularity in England was founded especially upon his English songs, and his links with an amateur audience, as Grove summarized. Though the Italian outnumbered by far both the English and French, his popularity rests mainly on his English ballads. The wind and tide of fashion are fully in his favor, yet it would be unsafe to determine what place he will ultimately hold among song composers. What can even now be said of him is that he has an elegant, simple, and facile inspiration, a style of his own, a genuine Italian flow of melody, and great skill in finding the most appropriate and never a failing effects for drawing room songs. There is therefore good ground to hope that his future works may win for him from critics of all nations the high estimation in which he is now held by English and Italian amateurs. Originality and approachability are keynotes of both assessments. In both cases, Tosti is a figure who slips between environments, and his music seems to construct a particular bourgeois space for listeners, even as it circulates widely across society. Roosevelt, however, paints Tosti as an aristocratic figure in many ways, in ways that also make sense given the particular context in which she is writing. She says elsewhere in her account that he, for example, is the world expert when it comes to tact and manners, maybe even with Queen Victoria. And the implication is that his music moves from this milieu outwards and downwards, from prince to peasant. Grove instead emphasizes Tosti's links with amateur music making, even if the music might also be performed in concert halls and is defined by elegance as well as simplicity. The songs seem to draw listeners into a bourgeois domestic space, though it may not be of interest, of course, to all parties. Roosevelt, too, frames Tosti largely as an Italian visitor in London, whereas Grove has him appealing, above all, in English to English music lovers. Across the two accounts, a fragile equilibrium between mass appeal and originality emerges, and within London made perhaps more so by his success resting on a number of English songs that are strongly outnumbered by Italian works. These two accounts, from only 4 years apart, can raise some important questions about the social position of Tosti's music in London during his lifetime, ones already raised at various points during this conference so far. From Tosti's status as a foreigner who became part of the royal establishment, to the wide circulation of his music during a widening split between art and popular music from the mid-19th century onwards, to the salon song's complex construction of a form of intimate musical address that hovered between public and private. In surveying the musical press and listings in London during Tosti's lifetime, it's abundantly clear that many of Tosti's Italian songs circulated very widely, including hit numbers such as Ideale, L'alba separa delle luci l'ombra, Mare Chiare and Sogno that still regularly feature on concert platforms today. But the discrepancy between the English song's ubiquity in Tosti's lifetime and their neglect today is particularly curious. In his biography of the composer, Francesco Sanvitali has already attributed this to Tosti's choice of poetic texts that today may seem very poorly judged and too sentimental. Tosti particularly favoured the works of Frederick Weatherly, a prolific ballad text writer who would also collaborate with André Messager on the operetta Mirette for the London stage in 1894. He in fact set only one poem by Tennyson, a clear contrast with his close relationship with Gabriele D'Annunzio. Yet this was hardly an obstacle to public success or a sense of Tosti's equal creativity in English during his own lifetime. In my paper today, I want to consider some of these issues a little further through a focus on a very small number of English-language songs, particularly Goodbye, the song from 1880 that became his greatest success in England, and that today holds a much, much smaller place in the repertory than his Italian language works. This disappearance reveals much about Tosti's changing reputation and the broader fate of the English drawing room ballad, I want to suggest, because it's Tosti's very ambivalence as a figure that makes him so interesting, even as these ambivalences have been increasingly ironed out in present-day reconstructions of him as a composer primarily of Italian art song. To that end, I want first briefly to outline the musical and vocal